Well, thank you for coming. My name is Rebecca Long, and I became the keeper of the light at Bald Head on Smith Island, a story that I would like to share with you today. I was born in 1755, and I married Henry Long, a fine man indeed, hardworking and diligent, a German immigrant who came to the United States, first to Maine, which he found inhospitable, and finally he traveled south to North Carolina, where through great fortune I met him in Brunswick County right here, and we married. Henry and I had 5 children together, beginning at the time of the American Revolution. I had a daughter, Rebecca, a son, Samuel, a son, Henry, and 2 more daughters, Elizabeth and Anne Eliza. Henry found work as a pilot on the Cape Fear River, a job where he learned firsthand how dangerous our local waters were to the ships that were vital to everything we needed in terms of trade and commerce along our coast. He learned that trade very well, and we were quite happy living right here in Smithville. He had bought 100 acres of land over by Dutchman Creek, and we built a house, we had a wonderful garden, and we could have stayed there happily forever. But life had something else in store for Henry, and that meant giving up our home and all of the comforts and moving to an uninhabited, desolate island. At first, I was excited. I thought this could be a great adventure. Our children were mainly grown and marrying and raising children of their own, and I thought, why not? What could go wrong? So we moved to the island in 1794, and it had taken the previous 10 years to construct this lighthouse. The state of North Carolina tried, starting in 1784. They had no luck building it, even though they raised some money and they did the best they could. It would be 5 more years before the lighthouse would be taken over by the United States Department of the Treasury under one Alexander Hamilton, of whom you may have heard tell. He was now in charge of what were called aids to navigation. And between the coast of New Hampshire, far to our north, and South Carolina to our south, there were only 12 lights operating. For such a long coastline, hardly enough. And there were 4 projects that were yet to be finished, including our Bald Head light. And it was with great difficulty and long duration and many ships lost and bricks that landed at the bottom of the ocean. But we did finally, in 1792 and 1793, get the light finally completed. And the first light shone from it in 1794, just around Christmas time. Now, daily life, I want to tell you at the lighthouse, was not quite what we expected. We knew it was a busy job and that the light had to be kept on every night and in fog and in storms and whenever the weather required. But we were told that this light had a new innovation that would make our lives much, much easier. In the past, the lighthouses were actually lit with candles, if you can imagine. But this light was lit with whale oil. And the whale oil was delivered to us from ships and stored in huge barrels. And we then had to carry it up 6 flights of stairs to the top of the lighthouse several times a day to fill these enormous metal pans. This light was called a spider light because in each pan hung down 24 wicks to bring up the oil and burn it. And we thought, well, that is a lot easier than candles, don't you think? But what we did not figure on was this. Whale oil is a vile, vile stuff. The smell alone would make a strong person weak with its sickness. When you burn it, every surface nearby is covered with soot and grease and grime, and it was a never-ending job to clean it, because what good would it do to run a light with the windows obscured with all of this filth? So I was soon helping Henry with all of this. And fortunately for us, we had 2 slaves and an indentured servant to help as well, because this became a never-ending job. And we had a great deal to worry about. It was a good job, and we were grateful for Henry's pay, which was $300 a year, which was the highest pay for anyone in the lighthouse service. And it sounds like a lot of money, maybe, but we had a lot of expenses as well, because the land that was given to us with our little house at the lighthouse, we were not allowed to cut down the trees for timber. We were not allowed to dig up everything to plant gardens, we had a lovely garden in Smithville. So we had to pay for or trade for some of these things. We had to hunt for food in terms of, fishing and hunting. And we had to bake our own bread. We had to do everything running the house in addition to running the lighthouse. So there was not a lot of time to sit and wonder about our choice. We were here, and this was our job. We also had to contend with the weather, and never, even though I have lived near the coast most of my 60 years, had I ever seen any weather like this. We had hurricanes, of course, and storms, and days of rain, days of fog, but in July of 1806, we had water spouts, something dark and horrible. In the middle of a summer day, the sky turned completely black. And these spouts rose from the sea, spiraling around and lashing we thought this was the end. We thought that something satanic or just evil had happened, and this was the end of our world. But as you can tell, it was not. But even in the summer months, when you think it would have been quite nice, we had extreme storms, we had tormenting mosquitoes from the swamps that ate us alive as we went about our hard work. So in 1804, sadly, my daughter Elizabeth passed away, leaving her husband, Joseph Swain, with 2 young children and unable to find a way to care for them and provide for them. So he moved out to Smith Island, to Bald Head with us, and we tried to get him engaged in some of the tasks and some of the work that needed to be done. And what he was especially good at was hunting. He was a good hunter, and he would faithfully go out and look for deer and wild boar. There were rabbits. Sometimes we subsisted on just squirrels or maybe a partridge or something small, but there were plenty of animals that we could hunt. And he had his 2 small children with him, which, while it eased my grief as a mother to lose a daughter, Bald Head was no place for small children. So we needed to make sure they were watched every moment of the day so they didn't slip off into the river and disappear or get into trouble or run away into the woods where we could never find them. So it's just another responsibility for us to take on in addition to everything else. Well, one evening in October of 1806, Joseph set out, as he often did in the afternoon, to go hunting. And he went into the woods, and we didn't expect to see him back for perhaps a few hours. But as it was beginning to get dark, we thought maybe something had befallen him. So my husband, Henry, went out, and he was gone for a while. And Joseph apparently didn't find anything. He was waiting in the woods and hunting in his usual spots, and didn't want to come home empty-handed. So when he heard something in the woods, suddenly he realized there was some game nearby. He picked up his musket and fired, killing Henry immediately with a shot straight to the stomach. When Joseph got home, he was raving like a madman, and I couldn't get him to explain to me what was wrong. And I finally asked him again and again, and he finally blurted out what had happened. And my son-in-law had killed my husband. I could not make sense of this. And I honestly, when I look back and I want to tell you what I did, everything from that time is a blur. I don't recall. But what I do recall is that night and every night after that, I tended the lighthouse. The light had gone out in my life, but there was no way we could possibly let the light go out in the lighthouse. This time of year, such long, dark hours, such terrible weather, we could not take a chance on risking the brave sailors that navigated our channel. When Henry's obituary was written up in the Wilmington Gazette, they said that the circumstances surrounding the demise of this respectable old gentleman were truly disheartening. And I thought, it's a bit beyond disheartening, but that is how it was. We had Henry's funeral. We got through the days somehow, and I kept the light lit, and we knew that sooner or later someone else would be put in place to take Henry's position as the lighthouse keeper. But who that would be and how that would come about, I had no idea. So you can imagine my surprise when I learned that several gentlemen in Wilmington had submitted my name as the person who should continue to run the Bald Head Light. A woman, Rebecca Long. And there was also a nomination for a man, a Mr. Cedric Springs. I was almost amused to learn that Mr. Springs was in his 70s. And I thought, well, this will be a fine job for such an elderly man. Who lives into their 70s and does this sort of work? But it was not for me to say. So correspondence went back and forth between these gentlemen and President Thomas Jefferson, to whom my nomination had been sent. And eventually, after many months, a letter came back from President Jefferson saying that the appointment of a woman to a position such as this is an innovation for which the public is not ready, nor am I. And I thought, well, if President Jefferson has said it, that is the final word. So I remained at my post, faithfully tending the light, until Mr. Cedric Springs got himself to the island. I showed him what needed to be done, how to handle the whale oil, all of the responsibilities. I wished him well, and my family came and brought me back to Smithville, where I lived out my days, surrounded by family, including grandchildren. And I would say to you, despite the losses, not only of my husband and my daughter, but I lost a son, Samuel, who was a river pilot as a young man. These are difficult losses to endure, but my life was interesting, almost remarkable, and I felt that I did something meaningful with it. And I thank you for listening.